Hello, I hope you all are doing so well. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to come in and just chat about things a little bit today because it's very clear, very apparent that what we will be experiencing, what we are experiencing now, and what we're going to continue to experience is more and more confusion in the world. As I just kind of scan in the physical environment, right, kind of take a note of things that I'm seeing and witnessing, what I'm noticing is that there is this continual bombardment with sound bites, with clips of stories, with narratives from every angle, every perspective you could possibly hold in this realm. Essentially, our planet, this realm, is moving, right? We could say whatever terms we want to use to describe it, but it's as if we've gone all the way to the extent of the darkness that we could possibly go to. I've always taken comfort in the fact that the light will always return back to where it started, right? So darkness, demonic energy is essentially totally cut off from feeling its own light source, right? But there comes a time where if something is totally cut off from its own light, it has to go out and seek other sources, right? But even in that process, there's a point where it basically eats itself alive, let's say, where there's just nothing left to consume. And so it starts to have to return back from where it came from. And this is essentially what we're experiencing right now, right? We've gone all the way into total darkness as far as we can go. And I know in the physical, it looks like, wow, things can get so much worse. Energetically, it's already there. It's been here. It's been under the surface. We haven't been able to see it maybe with our physical eyes. But those of us who are sensitive have always felt this all of our lives, right? Things are off. Things don't make sense. Things aren't the way they're supposed to be. We know life is supposed to be easier. We know there's a different way to be here. Why is that not happening? All these kinds of things, right? So energetically, we've been sensing and feeling this all of our lives. It's only now that in connection with our awareness and understanding and in connection with it coming up to be released through the physical, that it looks like total and utter chaos, right? So one of the things that I'm finding very, very important is to understand the process of narratives and how these come about. I've been seeing a lot of things about data analysis, right? What does that mean? And how are we being manipulated by that? And even this term manipulation we have to look at, right? Because oftentimes we say, oh, someone's being deceitful, they're being manipulative. We say it as if you see the manipulation and you see the deceit, right? Those aren't actual things. It's a word to describe something that is happening. What's actually happening is that what we're seeing looks like one thing, but on the other side of it, on the back side of it, energetically, something totally different is happening, right? Or their intention, and maybe even subconscious intention, is different than what they're presenting in the physical to your face, right? So there's no actual, here is manipulation, you can pick it up and look at it. Manipulation means there are two different energies, two different messages going on that are at odds with each other. And so as a sensitive person, you're always able to feel that. And yet, because of what you see in the physical and you experience there, you've learned to turn off that intuition, that gut knowing, right, that tells you something is off, because typically in society, other people around us don't feel it, sense it, understand it, know it, whatever it is. And in order to stay where they are, they tell us that's not true, whatever. We learn all these things, right? We're conditioned, we are groomed in this world to turn off our intuition. So that's one factor, right? Because when we say, okay, you were manipulated, you were deceived, and you're like, oh my God, how come I didn't see it? Well, because you're not supposed to see it. That's the way it's designed, right? It's designed that it appears to be something else, and that's its goal, is to hide what's truly going on behind the scenes. So we can't say now that it's like there's this weird, how are we so manipulated? How are we so deceived? Because it's playing on a system within us. This is how we feel deception internally in our body, right? But we have been conditioned to turn that off. And so now we're conditioned to only take at face value or data or facts or show me the proof, or even in a very watered down version, right? It's like, just let me see this article or this sound bite, and then that's what I take as being reality because it shows up, or let's say as being real and true because it shows up in the physical reality, right? And yet we're not looking on the other side of it. But society as a whole has been conditioned not to look on the other side of the curtain, or not to look on the other side of what appears to be a one-way mirror. It's actually a two-way mirror, right? So knowing this, all of this is designed to have us subconsciously and eventually consciously shutting down our lie detector system, right? So when we say, how can this be happening in the world? Well, is it really surprising? Because nobody ever says, yeah, I'm manipulative. Yeah, I deceive people. It makes you feel uncomfortable. You're afraid to call it out because then people can say, well, I didn't do that. I didn't say that, right? Like, what you're seeing is not what you're saying, or what you're feeling is not what you're seeing. All these kinds of techniques to explain away what you're really feeling. And what you feel is the truth, not what you see. And yet in this world, we've been trained to believe that what you see is real, and there's nothing else behind that. And we see this all the time. So even with data, when we have data means nothing. It's just an observation of what is. And the only reason it takes on a meaning is because someone interprets it. And they say, okay, let's put these things together. Let's make a story out of it. Let's see if we can make it make sense. What does this mean? But to understand, as a human, you're still coming from prior experience. You still have a ton of, how do we even process this data? Generally, it's very hard for us to accept things outside of a given construct, outside of what we already know, right? So people who are interpreting data, generally, we're still coming from a conditioned position. And unless you're working in a highly experimental, controlled kind of laboratory environment where you have no attachment to a desired outcome, the interpretation of the data is going to be skewed. Absolutely. Unless you're starting and you're, I forget all these terms from science, right? But like your initial thoughts are laid out and defined and described, right? In order to control, or let's say define, the box through which you are looking at the data. And then there's the laboratory stuff, yes, which is different, but we're not talking about something that is, yes, we're seeking to see if we can find something different as we acquire this data, right? Generally, in the media world and what we are exposed to in a daily experience, it's not under that, let's see what we can learn. Let's see what new things can we describe, what new things can we interpret, what new things can we discover. That's not at all what our daily reality is about. Our daily reality is about shaping a narrative for a desired outcome. So we take these data points, whatever the set is, and we put a label on them and we call them facts. And then we create these narratives around these facts. And I'm sure you've seen this where, okay, because we have this very polarized kind of left and right atmosphere going on, right? Same incident, same experience, but told from different perspectives, different labels, totally different energies, right? So what is the truth in all of that? We're not going to find the truth or the reality in it because it's coming through a human, which is conditioned, which is coming from perspectives. All of those perspectives are based on past conditioning, past experiences, past trauma, past wounding, right? We have to understand people who are sending us these narratives now are coming from their own place of human experience. And yet, this is where we have to say, okay, we're not attempting to come from the past human experience anymore. We're wanting to bring in a whole new perspective, a whole new reality based on the light. And what is that? That can't have anything to do with these old narratives and old interpretations. So moving forward, what's going to happen? We're going to continue to be bombarded by, let's say, poisoned narratives, altered narratives, tainted narratives. And we're going to go into more and more confusion if we're trying to look at all these outside perspectives rather than coming into our own bodies, into our own senses, into our own feelings, and figuring out what is true for us. And we may have to move through a world where our internal set point, our internal narrative, it's still a narrative, right? Because it's coming from where we are. But the more that we have experiences, the more we weed out what is truly us and what parts of us have been conditioned by these narratives, the more we get closer to our true source light, right? So with integrity, and of course, it's like this is our goal, is always to come from a pure heart-centered space as best as we can. Of course, we're all human, so we're going to make mistakes. We're going to misinterpret, right? I'm not saying we are perfect, but the path that we need to start walking through the human has nothing to do with these outside narratives because they've been built for so long on so many perspectives and stories that aren't even true. So these narratives are trying to continue to build on false light, on mistruths, on twisted truths, all these kinds of things. So where do we find our sanity? Where do we find peace and stillness? It's going to be connecting into our own light, our own truth, and allowing that to be the dominant narrative in our life, even if, and it will be, it is in contrast to all these millions of other narratives that are coming at you, right? And this is where we wake up in the mornings. We can go to bed, spending the whole day trying to get ourselves to a still place, right? We can go to bed and we can wake up back into an old place. And why is that? That's because you have energies in your field, energies surrounding you that are trying to bring you back, to keep you back into these old narratives, because that's how these old narratives stay alive, is by pulling on the energy of the people around them. Right? And that's what always has fueled them. But for the first time in our experiences, we're seeing how that actually physically manifests, right? So I've had a couple of experiences over the last couple weeks. And again, I'm aware, right, that there's energy everywhere. There's all kinds of energies in my field. There's all kinds of energies in everyone's field, right, all the time, because we live next to other people. We live on the same planet with billions and billions and billions of different types of energies, right? It's not just us. So we're always bumping into things. So just to give you some examples, right? About 2 weeks ago, in my sleep, I was aware, I was aware after I had woken up, right? And then I was like kind of blown away by this whole thing. But what was happening was there was an individual coming to me energetically while I was sleeping, looking for help about how to work with the energies, right? And so I felt her come towards me and I was like, okay, this is what we have to do. You have to do that. And then I would wake up and I would say, no. I was like, okay, a bit confused, right? And then it happened again. She would move towards me and I would start to explain, okay, here's how you do it. You bring it down. And I would wake up again and I would get this no. 3 times this happened that I remember, happening. Probably more than that. But I had to sit with it a little bit when I woke up because I was a little bit shocked about it. So looking at it then, getting some space from it, I realized part of what was happening was as she was asking, how do I do this? I realized I was reluctantly then offering my perspective, offering my advice, kind of giving away my wisdom and my energy to this person who I don't even know where you came from. It's a past energy, right, that I interacted with many years ago. But it was strange because it's something that I've been trying to work out in the physical as well, right? There's a couple of different individuals that have kind of come in recently for things that I need to resolve, that I kind of thought were laid to rest. I thought I had dealt with, right? But not. Things still feel unfinished. So this was one of them. And I was really shocked because I'd never experienced, again, I know we do things in our sleep, right? I know we're working in other dimensions, but I had never actually recognized it, especially as specific as this. So when I sat back from it, I really felt like, I am kind of just giving away all this hard work that I've put into my energy. And I've gotten a lot of flack from people, right? Like, you analyze too much, you're too intense, you do all this kind of stuff, right? And then yet they come to me and now want assistance. What do you think? It's like, okay, but you're going to disrespect me on the other side of that. And you're not even really my friend, because really, what are you supporting me? When it's convenient, you want to badmouth me, knock my name, these kinds of things, right? And then, oh, here's where I see you can be of benefit, Paige. Here, show me how to do this. Oh, okay. And it's not like I don't want to help people, right? Of course I do. So it's not that. It's more recognizing where we are disrespected, where people are taking advantage of us simply for their own needs, right? And this is every relationship that we have. This is what the world is based on, right? It's about, what can I get from you? What benefit are you going to bring me? And then I'll interact with you once I can see that, right? This is why relationships are so challenging and why we struggle with them, right? Rarely is it ever just, let's put our energies on the table and here we are. And let's just be in our energies, right? It's always about, what can I gain? What am I going to lose? And more often we're just thinking about, what can we gain, right? It's not about losing anything. And that's why we end up in these situations, because we don't realize we're giving these things away. We are actually, it's not an exchange, right? We're not getting something from the other person. So then the energy is totally unbalanced. And why do we feel empty and depleted and exhausted? And my guess is that we are actually giving away tons and tons and tons of energy, and we don't realize it. So this is what's been coming up over the last several weeks, where I've been made very aware of all of these unconscious places that I've just been throwing my energy out like it's feed, feeding the chicken. It's like, here you go, throwing it out there and receiving very little back as a result of that. And wondering, right, why am I exhausted? Several other individuals too, which are representative. It's not just these particular people, right? But they are representative of let's say a system of energy siphoning, each one in their own particular design, right? But essentially all the same thing, stealing from your field. And even these are the people who would accuse you of stealing from them, right? Like, you're trying to keep me trapped in a relationship, or you're stealing my energy work and all this kind of stuff. And what are we noticing about this? There's something really, really fascinating about mirrors that's been coming up over at least the last month for me, right? And I'm like, what is it about this like two-way mirror, which is actually called a one-way mirror, right? Because you think you're just looking at a reflection. What's happening is someone is on the other side of that, looking into your field. And yet you're not aware of that. So you think what you're feeling and receiving is a reflection of your energy and what you're doing. And yet what they're really doing is coming through the other side so that you can't see them and stealing from you. And yet then they come and they blame, because remember earlier when I was talking about manipulation, you don't actually see it. Manipulation and deceit is like the separation between these mirrors, right? Or the space between you and this other person. And they're making you think it's you. And really their intention is much different. It's to see whatever they can get out of you, right? So, gosh, at least 3-4 different instances of this has come into my awareness. There was another instance where I woke up in the morning, so much pain in my body, and I was just instantly aware. I'm like, oh my goodness, I see this person. I see what they're doing. They've been doing this for years and years and years. You know, rejecting me on the surface, saying I don't need this, and yet energetically, totally playing in my energy field, right? And again, nighttime, big time for this to happen, because all of our kind of conscious awareness shuts down, right? And we just kind of open up to the universe here. And so people who are used to pulling from us, this is what I'm being shown. I'm imagining it's happening for a lot of people though too, right? It's not just me. And what I want to point out is that if you're not aware of it, start to pay a little bit more attention, because, you know, again, I always say, okay, yeah, what we're seeing in the physical world is what's happening in the physical world. But energetically, what does that mean for you? Yes, we're seeing this kind of disclosure and, revealment, unveiling of stuff. But it happens in the energy fields first. So chances are it's been going on for you. So if you haven't been totally made aware of this by your consciousness, this may be something you want to kind of ask about, and to see who's been playing in your sandbox without your knowledge, without your permission. Chances are there's lots of people in there, lots of energies. Again, these people represent these specific types of systems, right? So, I had to do a private lesson with my dog because I'm still struggling with him, right? And I knew he came into my life for a very specific reason. I just couldn't quite figure out how to label it or what it was, right? And I know he's a German Shepherd, dominant dog, very, very smart, right? But essentially we could say, and now in hindsight, right, I'm kind of on the other side of this, he is manipulative and he is deceptive. It's not that he's intending to manipulate me, right? But what does that energy do? That energy looks at you and it sees your every move. And basically, what he was doing, so I've taken, right, we sent him for training, came home, totally different dog. Within 2 days, I was already having issues with him, like, growling at other dogs, whatever. I'm like, okay, I know it's me. I've watched Caesar enough times to know it's me. And he's always like, you have to be like this, right? Strong. And I'm like, okay, but what is that? Because even though I'm aware that, yes, it's weak owner that's causing this issue, I still don't know in the physical how that's actually playing out, because I can speak to the dog demanding that he follow the command, but it's still like I'm still struggling. He's still pulling. He's still hyper focused on everything else but me. Like what is the key here, right? So we went through this whole thing, and the trainer was like, okay, I want you to give him these commands, right? So in the course of all this, it started to become very apparent to me, okay, he's challenging me, right? Like, he's trying to see how much he can get away with. The more he gets away with, the more he can, like, his goal is just to not do anything, right? It's just to be able to lay there and don't bother me, human. That's what he wants, right? So in the course of all of this, I had given him a command and he didn't do what he was supposed to. He did something different, right? So the trainer was like, no, you need to take his chain and you need to pull him back to where he was, and you need to correct him in this way and use these words and use this motion. And so it was like this whole kind of dance, right? These 3 different things I had to do at the same time, which it's like learning a whole new language, right? Or a dance, really, because I was like, oh my God, I feel like I need 5 arms. I have to say it. I have to correct physically. I have to use the other collar to correct him as well, so that eventually he won't even need the physical leash. I can correct only using the e-collar, right? Which is great, and that's the goal. But it's like, it's a whole coordinated kind of thing. So not only am I still training him, or is he training me to be this whatever kind of, the person in charge, essentially, is what's happening, right? He's challenging me to be the person in charge, is the way I'm looking at it. And it really is what has been happening. But anyway, so as I was pulling him back, put him in my spot, I could feel this ripple happen between the 2 of us. It was as if this kind of energy dropped in this planar dimension of where we were. Like, I almost viscerally, I know this doesn't really make sense, could see the waves and the ripples of it, right? And I could feel the shift. I could feel a shift in him, which was kind of like, oh man, she's got it. She figured it out. And it wasn't until I practiced over and over and over, and then worked with a different trainer, till I was actually able to physically experience the shift in the energy, right? And it wasn't about, okay, you have to stand here and you have to yell at him and make sure he does what he does. It's not about that. Right? It's about, she said, okay, he's over here, and use the hand command, right? So we took the class for hand commands, and I'm like, man, this isn't going to work, because when I just do the hand command, I don't think he knows it, right? So I just was like, okay, and he laid down, and I was like, wait a minute, did you correct him? She's like, no. Okay, so this whole time, he has known the hand commands. I didn't know that he knew. Okay, so he was in class learning. I would practice with him, but I would give him the command. He wouldn't do the command. So I just assumed he has no idea what I'm saying, right? And in that moment, I was like, oh my God, I see what's happening here. He totally knows. He's the best actor in the world. He had me believing he doesn't know shit. He's a cute, adorable puppy who's just too big. He can't sit. He's too tired. He just lays right down. He's lazy. He's none of that. He's none of that. But he will act that way if he can get away with it. And that's what these narcissistic, manipulative people in our lives will do, right? So unless we see the game of it, unless we're willing to admit there is darkness playing in our field, we're not going to break through that barrier and not be able to see this code, this key that's here. This is the time we're in right now. We're being given the codes and the keys. We've stepped over a threshold since yesterday into these dark places in our field, which I don't know if we weren't allowed to be there before, we just didn't have enough light to withstand witnessing. That's more what it feels to me. As if we stepped over this threshold in total darkness. The only light is the light in our own fields right now. And that's what is shining the light into the dark places of our field where we haven't been able to be before. So unless we have our light here, we're in our knowing of who we are. And again, it's not like I know everything about who I am. No, this is always an exploration and an evolvement of our energy fields. But we know enough to know that our truth is our truth. What we feel inside is our truth. And just because you tell me it's not doesn't mean that it's not, right? It's more about getting our navigation system of how we navigate the light versus the dark messages we're receiving, which are always telling us we're wrong, so that we question ourselves and turn off our light and succumb to the darkness, right? So it's about how we navigate, and then we are continually exploring and learning and expanding and growing as a result of that, right? But what is most important is, do I know my own truth when I feel it? It's not about, do I know the facts as the truth, or do I know this, or when someone presents something to me, should I know me? No, but you know enough to know what it feels like inside of you when you're presented with something that is off. And that's all we're really asking, right? Is to recognize when you feel agitated, when you feel like something is going on in your field, so that you can start to look at this and start to explore it. And this is really the point where most people stop because they're too afraid, right? They're like, oh, darkness and demons and these energies, and I'm scared of curses and black magic. And guess what? It's all in your field already. You know, we can tell this darkness, right? I've really taken to just calling it black magic because that's what it is, right? It's somebody else wanting to get something out of you. It's a negative intention for you. Might work out for them, but it's not in the best interest of both people. So therefore, it's going against source code, right? So we can call it whatever we want to. But worst thing would be to deny that this is happening in our fields. It's there. It's there in everybody's fields. None of us have escaped this. That's why we're here, right? To shift this out. So to pay attention. And I know this feeling, right? Because I have this all the time. It's like, I would rather not. I'd rather not know. I would rather ignore it because it feels too uncomfortable. I don't know what I would really do when I do see it. And the other part of it is like, then I also feel like, oh my God, I'm such a dummy. I got so duped. How could I believe that? How could I believe what they were saying to me? They were so nice and they sounded so loving and like they had my best interest at heart. And they were totally not. They were stealing my shit in my field. And then blaming me. Are you kidding? You know, this is the stuff that we are seeing right now. And then when you start to recognize that feeling and you get the separation between who you are without that, then you start to say, holy shit, I've been feeling this all my life. And all the things that I thought was wrong with me, all the things that I thought were wrong with me, in general, this big bag of burdens we've been carrying around, had nothing to do with us. It was with the darkness and the garbage that was in our fields. And it isn't just this lifetime either, right? So the conditioning that's been brought over, not just as a human, but as an energy being. We have to understand that too, right? We have our own conditioning in this society as a human being. As an energy being, we've also been conditioned energetically to accept this, to be okay with it, and it's just not okay anymore. It's just not okay. And so, as awful as it can sound, the beauty of this is that for the first time, we're actually experiencing freedom. And so this feeling of the freedom is really what is driving me right now. It's like, oh my God, I got a taste. Again, how many times have I said this? Game over, right? And thank you to this dog who came into my life and just ripped my life apart. You know, it was utter hell for months and months and months. And I've been talking about this, right? I just can't figure this out. I can't figure out what is this that Caesar talks about, right? And it's not like just being strong and showing who's boss. It's about recognizing when he was doing what he was doing, yes, challenging me, right? Like, how far can I push her? If I just refuse to sit over and over and over again, will she give up and walk away? Yeah, that's what I was doing, right? That's what these energy beings are doing to us, right? I'm going to ask for help. Okay, she gives me a half heart. Okay, yeah. I'm going to ask her again. Okay, she does it again, right? So these people that come into our lives, subconsciously, they can already see how we behave, right? Even if they're not even aware that they're picking up on these signals, they are, like, energetically, and it's not even energetically, right? Physically, we can see the shifts in the eyes, we can see the eyes, like, you're unsure of yourself. You can tell when you're really tuned in, but we're so used to, like, shutting down in our own selves, we don't even realize this is a thing that's going on, right? And then before we know it, we're totally swept up in it, totally wondering how we got into this abusive relationship, how we got into an abusive relationship with a healer, right? Who's totally just wiping our fields of everything that we've ever worked for, taking it as their own. You know, it's horrible, the things that are going on, but it isn't just happening now, it's been going on forever, right? So we're just seeing it and recognizing it now. And it's not until you can see it and admit that it's happening that you can start to release from it, right? And this is what's so challenging, because we don't want to be seen as a victim. We don't want to call ourselves victims. You know, and I'm not obviously saying we need to do that, but there's, again, it's a weird word, right? Like, what does that really mean? It's like, oh, you're not taking responsibility, or oh, you're blaming someone else, or like, what is that? So there's probably a better expression for that. But the issue is that if these things are going on, it won't just magically go away. And again, that's part of why we're here. It's to root out this crap that has been controlling our fields ever since our inception here, right? So we have to look at it, admit it, accept it. And that doesn't feel good. But on the other side of that, oh my God, we're free. Oh my God, we're free. Oh my God, then we are in control of our lives. And we can see that stuff coming from a mile away, right? Like, there's a weird experience that I have too, right? Like, so when I was in class with the dog, and he went after, we're in this agility class now, so he was like running, and as he came out of the chute, there was little dog at the end of that, right? So he went after this dog, and again, he's just dominant, and he's huge, and his growls and it's more scare than anything, right? So probably insecure is what it is, but he's a dominant dog, and so when you combine those things together, it's like, oh my God, the whole room freaks out, right? Even though he's not biting, he's not trying to attack, he's not trying to hurt anything. And yet in that moment, when I start to hear the noise, right, and the scramble, and I'm like, I black out. It's like you shut your vision off, like physically and energetically, I'm assuming as well, right? And then you're like, what? I don't even know what happened in that moment, right? So energetically with these people, same thing, right? Before we're like, why did I go? But I told myself last time they said this to me, or they did, I wasn't going to fall for it, right? Same thing. It's this scramble of energy that happens in your field to keep you from clearly seeing, to keep you from clearly understanding how these energies are playing you, right? So with this dog, I've had to back it up day by day, piece by piece. I'm like, how does this actually manifest and happen in the physical? And finally, I had that moment where he gave himself away, right? Like, if he had not just laid down when I gave him that hand command, I don't know that all of this would have been unlocked for me, right? So this is the other thing we say about these energies. Again, it's not like they're the darkest, most demonic people in the world. Some of them are. Chances are we all have that in our field. But then there are the other ones who are just like, well, they hang around, right? Can I get a sip here? Can I get a nibble here? Can I get a crumb, right? Just like the dog. If you drop something, I'll pick it up, right? Like, even though I should like say, hey, you dropped it, this is yours. They're just going to eat it up, right? So they're always hanging around, bothering you. So you're like, distracted by that too, right? This is the other thing. Like, they don't have to be just actively taking shit from you, just their presence, right? You're like, I really want to go do this, but then, oh, I can't even focus, like, because there's all this agitation around you. So these energies, though, you will find that they have to reveal themselves to you. They will reveal themselves to you. They probably already have revealed themselves to you, but you didn't pay attention, couldn't see it clearly in the moment, right? But as we get more space, we'll go back to these moments where we're like, you know what, that person did tell me sometimes they feel like they have an alter ego, and that they're doing, oh yeah, that person did reveal to me that they had this exact same thing happen to them, and now I see this is what they've been doing to me, right? So darkness always reveals itself. It has to. This is part of what I was talking about in the beginning. Once darkness gets to this point, it has to return to the light. So the underlying energy is always evolving to return to the light anyway. Even if the darkness thinks it's playing out darkness, right? And it's doing this, the underlying code is a return to light anyway. So essentially, it's like nothing that even happens here matters, because it's all going to come back to light. And it just is. That's like the reset. It has to happen. That's origin point. It came from the origin. It has to return to the origin, no matter how many times you twist it, move it, mirror it, obstruct it, add other shit into it. Yeah, it might take longer, but essentially it always comes back, right? So this is the joy of the time we're in right now, is to say, okay, everything looks like it's going to shit. Fine. But let me see the game in it, and let me learn about myself. This is the beauty of being incarnated in a body, right? We can work with the energy at the same time as we're working in the physical. We can physically manifest. but we're learning about ourselves the whole way through. So yeah, it's a big bill on our table, right? There's a lot to do here. We came here to do a lot of things. First and foremost, to release from the shit, right? But once you get that key, once you get that one exposure where it's totally proven to you, that's all you need. So now I'm like, okay, this person in my, relate it to what happened with the, okay, totally challenge me. They're just pushing me, and they will continue to push me until I say no, until I'm like, you know what? I know we've been doing this for a really long time this way, but here's how I'm feeling about it, and this is not working anymore, and I'm not okay with this anymore, right? You're going to get your exposure, you're going to get your key, and you're going to take that, and you're going to apply it to every situation in your life now. And this is the beauty of it, right? So yes, there may be dark controlling forces, but this brilliant gift we have, it's really our birthright, right? And this, like, it's, how else can I say this? I wish I could share with you the joy that I am feeling in my heart with this. You know, and yes, this victim mentality of like, this is so hard and I keep waking up and like all this stuff and all this stuff. Yes, there is a process we have to go through in order to experience this and in order to learn that this is the game that's being played. We're playing it, it's played on us, it's whatever. I don't know how to express that, right? But it's like, once you see it, it doesn't really matter what comes at you, because you know the whole goal of anything that comes at you is to keep you from your light. And so now that I know, okay, let me take the reverse of that. My reverse of that is just to keep moving towards my light, no matter what people say, no matter what people are putting on me, no matter how many people come to me in my sleep. I don't care. Like, I can see through it. Maybe in the physical, sometimes it gets a little bit harder to carry on certain days. Certain people are really coming at me. Certain systems are really pissed. It's okay. It's okay. Because they are invested in keeping that distorted system alive, right? They are frantic because that's all they know, because they haven't done the inner work. And that's got to be a really scary place for them. And I really feel for people who are stuck in these systems. The only thing they have is to keep feeding that system, to keep that belief and that narrative alive, because guess what? They've also sucked other people into it. So now if those people start figuring it out that, oh, it's just about me. It's about me going off on my own. It's about me building my light, building my true narrative for me. They're not going to have a following. They're not going to have anything to feed them. They're not going to have anything to sustain them. But guess what? Like, the reason they do that is because they don't want to face their own shadows, and they don't want to face what's inside of them. And so the reason they've continued to pull other people in, to steal other people's energies, and to meddle around in places they don't really belong, is because they're really just afraid of facing themselves, right? So in the end, we are all actually going through the same thing. And we can have compassion for them, but we don't have to play with them. And once again, we see this and we understand it at a cellular level, right? Like, that's what had to happen for me. I needed a physical shift, a physical feeling of it for my cells and my body to experience, what was really going on with that, right? Like, literally see him follow this command that I fully, truly believed he did not know how to do, right? Like, my belief system, my narrative was actually wrong in comparison to what was actually going on. And yet I knew that I could feel something was off, right? Because there was this rift between us. There was this struggle and this grit. And like, every day it was like, I don't want to walk you. This isn't fun, but it should be fun. I know it should be fun. That's the light saying, right? Like, I know this isn't the way it's supposed to be. I know it should be different. And that is your guiding light, right? Like I've said, it pays to be dissatisfied with your life. That is your light speaking. That's your light calling you to come forward. You know it should be easier. You know it should be better. You know it shouldn't be this way. But instead of saying, oh, it is this way and it really sucks, no. Keep following the way that you know that it should be. and ask for the answer, it will be shown. The more you dig your feet in, the more you dig your heels in and say, no, it should be better, that's your best defense. That's your code. That's your light code. Right? But where we give up and we say, oh my gosh, like my astrology chart, look at all these contradictions, and oh my gosh, like the family I was born into. Yeah, but you were born into it in order to free yourself from it, because this isn't the only lifetime all this stuff has happened to you, right? And this was your plan. This release from your imprisonment, it's happening right now, and you don't have to wait for it to happen in the physical world for you to experience your freedom within your own light. So I am super excited to share all of this with you. And I hope that makes sense. And I hope that if you aren't feeling these revealings yet in your own field, that you will start to, first and foremost, connect to your light in the sense of where you are unhappy in your life and say, this isn't right and it needs to change. That's your birthright. That's your light. You own that. That is yours. Right? And that's the first step. Where am I unhappy? Where am I dissatisfied? Because that stuff needs to recode to the truth of who I am. And most people are too afraid to admit it, to ask for it, to believe it. This is what it means to stand in your light. Not the whole world is a mess and I have to heal it and this needs to happen in order for this world to reprogram. Yeah, down the road. But that's not going to happen until everybody comes here and says, this is my life, this is my truth. Let me clean up the mess in my own field first. And we come together, and the more of us that do this and support each other in doing this, this is how we change our world that we live in. Okay, I'm going to leave that here. I hope that makes sense. I wish you all a very wonderful rest of your day. Take good care.